Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Speaking About Speaking. And as you can see with me on the screen today is my lovely friend, Adam Armstrong. Hello, Adam.
Hello, Jackie. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I mean, it's going to be a lovely half an hour, I know, because we spend so much time in between getting people to do stupid things like improvise. We end up having a good old natter. But Adam is a trainer, a coach and speaker, and a former head boy of and teacher at the famous Italia Conti Performing Arts School. So your acting credits, and as I was saying to you before we started, Adam, I was looking all over social media for images of you in your acting roles in The Bill, Grange Hill, The Minder, all of those, and I couldn't find them anywhere. I'm going to ask you about that, where these beautiful images of you in costume are. And as a teacher, you've taught the likes of Russell Brand, Danny Mays, Martine McCutcheon, Claire Goose. I mean, they've gone on to be some, real celebrities. So tell us about how your connection with Italia Conti started. Obviously, you started there as a student. How did that kind of come about? And then how did you end up staying there as a teacher?
It's do you know what? I think about the whole journey from then to now. I went to Conti's when I was 9 years old, and I'm now 58, and I know, but I am 58. So thank you. You're very good. I think that nigh on 50-year journey now really is a whole series of absolute sliding doors. So primarily, I went to Conti's when I was 9 because my brother and I were leaving. We lived down on the south coast for a little while, and I was born and raised in London, and we were moving back to London. And my mum and dad were trying to find a school for us to go to when we moved home, and they weren't entirely sure where to send us. And my dad was a former producer of theatrical shows back in the 50s. And in the 50s, Conti's had been in and around Soho. That's where they were housed in those days. And that was where he did his review shows. And so whenever he needed children, he went to Conti's and used their kids. So he knew about Conti's. And I was a bit of a show-off at that time. And my dad said, well, why don't we send them there for a little while, see if it's the right place for them, and see what happens. So we went, and my brother and I went, and it worked. And we stuck, and we both found our acting feet. And then what was interesting, when I was 19, I was coming into my last year at Italia Conti. They did a children's school and then a 3-year performing arts course. And in my last year, Conti's moved. And they moved 5 minutes away from where I live. So suddenly Conti's was on my doorstep, which meant when I actually left, my friends who were still there, I would come and see them at lunchtime. And by then, Conti's had latched onto me as a teacher. And I'd taken my teaching qualifications. And so Conti said, well, you're around the corner. If we ever need a teacher, can we call you? And that's what they did. And my classes were very well received. So then they gave me full-time teaching. It was perfect because for the next 10 years, I could act. And whenever I wasn't acting, Conti's would give me a job as a teacher. And so we had my acting life and my teaching life kind of worked beautifully in parallel with each other. And then when I left Conti's, which was 95, I went out and did a lot of private teaching, and then slipped into this strange world, this training and development world, which was another sliding doors moment. But that's the Conti connection.
Yeah. Well, yes, we'll come on to the training in a second, but I don't want to go away from Conti's just yet. So because obviously if people out there don't know, and if you are listening out or watching us out there, then please do leave a comment. You're more than welcome to join in with us here and comment. And if you're watching the replay, then please do the same. But if people out there don't know what Conti's is, can you explain a little bit how it worked? Because it is a school. It's a performing arts school, but you can go there as a child and obviously get your GCSEs and those sort of qualifications. Yeah, so you can go there from what age?
Well, not anymore. You could.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You could go there. Well, ideally, you were meant to go at 11. It's a secondary school. I went there when I was 9. I went there a couple of years early, but they were happy for me to go then. And in those days, they ran the Italia Conti Junior School ran through to, well, O levels for me, but subsequently GCSEs. But they actually closed down the children's section of the school. I think it's a couple of years ago now. And so now all they run is a 3-year performing arts course. That's all they do. And they've moved outside London. They're in Surrey now. So it's a very, very, very different place to the one I went to. Bears very, very little resemblance to the place that I went to.
Yeah, because it's well over 100 years old, isn't it?
So it was founded in 1911. So and it was when the junior school closed a couple of years ago. Well, those of us who went there as kids, you know, we were devastated because there's a real legacy there. I went to school. I mean, literally in my class was Bonnie Langford. Bonnie was a classmate of mine. In the year above me was beautiful poor old Lena Zavaroni. She was in the year above me. And so many people that have gone on into careers. Lisa Maxwell was in my class. She's now on Loose Women, isn't she? And she was in the bill. And so many other people were in and around that. So that legacy of the junior school was kind of rich. So it's a shame that's gone now.
And it kind of seemed to produce those kind of the stalwarts of our kind of TV industry, you know, that, I mean, I remember Bonnie Langford when I was a kid, you know, she's sort of probably the same age as me, but I wanted to be an actor as a child. It was what I wanted to do. So I can remember watching, was it Junior Showtime or something? I do vaguely remember a show that she was on when she was little, and watching her and sort of, I'd like to do that. But, yeah,
but I always wondered whether, I'm sure Conti's produced a lot of people who went on to great careers. I think there's a fair old dichotomy of people that Conti's trained to go into their career, and some people like Bonnie who was already doing it by the time she came to Conti.
Yeah.
But I guess if you were doing it, Conti's was the perfect place to go to.
Yeah.
And I saw Bonnie actually back in January. She was in Old Friends in the West End. So I went to see her and had a little chat with her afterwards. And she, just one of the loveliest people you could meet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sort of stage school thing doesn't necessarily exist anymore for that age group, does it? You know, there's lots of...
There's a couple, but no, you know, my youngest son wants to be an actor for every effort I've made, my wife's made to convince him otherwise, but he's hooked. And he's 15. And we did talk for a while, should we go send him somewhere like Sylvia Young's or Arts Education or Tring? There are still a few places that do it. But I having been through it, I'm not convinced it's always the best thing for people. My brother was one of the early stars of Grange Hill. And he was in Grange Hill for 5 years, and then he got a spin-off series called Tucker's Luck. And George, as a result of being in Grange Hill for all of that time, missed most of his education.
Yeah.
He did scrape a few GCSEs, but not very many. And in later life, when the acting world just didn't take off for him, the adult acting world didn't take off, he pretty much had to retrain, which he did, and was very successful in what he moved on to doing. But one of the downsides of being a performing kid is you do miss a lot of your education. And one of the other challenges is that the day you turn 16, 17, all that work you did as a kid, all that is experience. But, you know, suddenly you're in a much more competitive world. When you reach that kind of 2021, where you're now competing against people who have trained in drama schools like RADA and LAMDA and Mountview and these kind of places, suddenly it's stiff competition. And if you haven't had that training, it can leave you behind. And so whilst though Conti's absolutely worked for some people, I think there's a lot of people that those schools don't work for and kind of leaves them behind. So
I can see that. I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. You obviously were talking about doing the teaching and the acting, which I tried. I did the acting, and every now and again I'd go off and get a teaching job, and then eventually it kind of am I freezing? I look like I've frozen.
No, you are.
Apologies for that. It felt like I ended up teaching more than I was acting, and then the teaching took over for me, which was hard, really. But it's very difficult to sustain a career with just acting.
Yeah.
Did you
Oh, it is.
find that?
Totally. The teaching worked perfectly for me, because one of the things I liked about it was the more I taught, I think the better an actor I got. The more I became, physician heal thyself. So I grew to understand being an actor a lot more from the teaching that I did. I was lucky because if I was available, there was teaching work for me, and because of the work I did at Conti's, other places invited me to go and teach for them. So there was always plenty of teaching work around. But whenever any teaching job I ever took was strictly on the proviso that if I got acting work, I could go and do it.
Right.
And I think that's the price a lot of these places pay for having teachers who act or teachers who perform. They have to kind of accept that. But the payoff is you've got people who don't just understand it, but are actually doing it as well.
No, absolutely. And that's what I like. I mean, I love teaching because it kind of brings out the director in me, which is what I always should have been, really. It's just getting in a space and and doing the whole kind of overlooking and seeing what everybody's doing, and that choreography that goes with alongside that.
You've got the eye for that. That's what you do so well.
Yeah, that's I love that. So tell me then, was that a reason that you started the training side? Was it because sort of to subsidize the acting, or had you sort of decided that was a better route to go?
In 1995, my agent, which was the Italia Conti agency, wasn't really working for me anymore, and I'd probably outgrown them, to be honest. And I spoke to a friend of mine who, a very successful actor teacher, worked in a lot of big movies with Dustin Hoffman, Warren Beatty, people like that, and a guy who I trusted. I said to him, I need a new agent. Where do I go? And he said, look, Adam, the problem you've got is the agent you need isn't going to take you on unless you're in something. And I said, well, how do I get in something without an agent? He said, well, that's the conundrum you've got. He said, but listen, you're a smart bloke. You've got a lot of good friends. Why don't you set your own agency up? There's lots of these cooperative agencies around. Why don't you set one of those up? And that way you can represent yourself, get yourself in something, and then from being in something, people will come and see you, and hopefully you can find an agent that way. So I did. I went off, and with half a dozen of my mates, we set up a cooperative actors agency. And this is sliding doors for you, Jackie. The Millfield Theatre in Silver Street, North London, they were putting on. I know it well. Well, they were putting on a production of Alfie. And casting for that came into our office, and I thought I fancy that, so I got an audition for Alfie. I did all of my homework, did all of my research, watched the film, read the script. I went along to this audition absolutely primed, and I got there on the morning of the audition, and it was all very quiet. And I knocked on a door, and this chap opened the door, and I said to him, "I'm Adam Armstrong. I'm here to audition for Alfie." And he looked at me like I was stupid, and he said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, the auditions were 2 weeks ago. We started rehearsals this morning." And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, God, what an idiot. I'm so sorry. There's obviously been a mess up. I'm sorry. And I was just about to go. And he said, "Well, hang on a minute." He said, "One of our cast dropped out this morning. Do you want to read in?" So I said, "All right." So I went in and I did a reading with the director, and he went, "Okay." And because they were multicasting in the show, he said, "Read another part." So I read another part, and he looked at me and he went, "Do you want to do it?" And I went, "All right then." And literally took my coat off, went downstairs and started rehearsals. Now, the reason I tell you this is because my cooperative agency had managed to get some funding to put on a showcase at the Old Red Lion in Islington. And on the last night of our performance of Alfie, I said to the director, "My agency's having a showcase next week. Do you want to come and see it?" He came to see it, liked it. And about 2 months later, he phoned up our office and he said, "I've got a new job finding role players for the corporate world. I got to find 120 role players to do this massive job all over the country. Does your agency want to do it?" So I said, "Yeah, we'll do it." And off we went. And we spent the summer role playing for Prudential, the insurance company. That job ended in November time. In the following January, he had left now, but that same company phoned us up and said, we've got another role play job. Do you guys want to do that one? So we went and did that job. And while I was doing that job, I met another chap who said to me, why should I use actors? And I explained why actors are great for role play work. And we got into a fabulous job with a big company called LV, or they're now called, or they used to be called Liverpool Victoria. While we were working with LV, really visionary guy there, got us as role players to do some observational work for him, just to record some feedback from the role plays. And he realized that the observational feedback that we were giving was very similar in parity to the work he was paying psychologists a lot of money to do. And he said, I don't understand. Why are actors able to give me similar feedback to psychologists? And I said, well, you don't understand. Actors are trained to be observant. We're trained to understand people. That's probably why. And he looked at me and he went, do you want to learn this stuff? And I said, all right then. So LV then invested in our training. I got a big old team, must have been about 24 of us. And we got qualified in certain areas of psychology. We learned all about training, all about development. And then the ball started rolling. Our actors agency then set up a training and development company, providing role players and assessors. And slowly we moved into training, and we reinvested the profits from all of the work we did into training ourselves until we became as qualified as anybody short of an occupational psychologist. And once that ball was rolling, suddenly we were getting more and more work, and acting became something that I used to do. And suddenly I was a trainer and I was a coach, and we were running big development centers for big businesses. And for the last 27 years now, that ball's kept rolling. And it was all because I was 2 weeks late for an audition for it.
Talk about sliding doors. That's incredible.
Amazing.
But life is full of those, and it is, they talk about luck being opportunity, and I can't remember what else. But for me, it's just the power of saying yes. Is just when these opportunities show themselves, say yes, just go for it, because you don't know where it's going to lead.
If no one's ever seen it, there's a great video on YouTube, which is about a group of basketball players throwing a ball around, and you're asked to count how many times the basketball is passed. But there's something you may not have noticed in there. I won't preempt it.
Oh, I know.
If you haven't seen it, but it's from the work of a guy called Richard Weissman. And Weissman was the guy who researched luck. And what he discovered is, yes, there is this ethereal thing called chance, but actually lucky people, from his observations, tend to be observant people. And observant people spot opportunities and they take opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's the people who don't take the opportunities who call those guys lucky.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I love the fact that going into the training, that the people that you're working with, because this is when I started this business nearly 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Happy birthday to me, almost. Lots of people couldn't understand how, as an actor, I could go into corporates. And I suppose myself, I also was sort of thinking, well, they'll just think I'm a bit fluffy and a bit creative, and I'm not going to understand. But what you said there about, the psychology that we learn as actors, it's hard to explain that, to get that across to sort of corporate businesses and leaders that are working in that environment and have always worked in that environment, and they don't understand how an actor's training can benefit them. And I say this, and I've written a blog about it, an article about it, just saying that the actor's training is so fundamental to every aspect of our lives. What else apart from the psychology? And we'll come on to, we could talk for hours. Sitting with the stunt trainees that we do, and when the psychology comes out, when in that circle that we sit and we're sort of talking to them about networking and about showing up in front of other people, and the psychology behind how we show up and how we build our confidence in order to get forward in our work, not just as a stunt person, but in everyday life. What other things can you name that you think an actor's training is good for in the business world?
I think the big one, and obviously I have to say this because it's how we started, is about role play and demonstration. Now, role play had its day. Late 90s, early 2000s. There, we were just one of many role play companies. Our whole mission was to work out how we could diversify from the other role play businesses. Role play isn't used as much as it used to because a lot of people find it embarrassing. Within our work, we use role play in slightly different context. We do the role plays. We don't make people role play with us, and we use it to demonstrate behaviors, to bring behaviors to life. Because when you run a training course, you can produce 4-box models. I can tell you stories and show you videos, and we can explain behavior to people, but it's not until you experience it that you know how powerful it is. So what we do on our training courses is we bring the behavioral issues to life. We'll get people to explain to us difficult customers or difficult members of staff or difficult situations they're in, and we bring them to life. And then by bringing them to life, we can then start showing how techniques and models and tools can address those kind of places. So number one, it's about being able to realistically bring all of the theories and concepts of a training course to life for an audience. And number two, it's the fundamental skill set of communication. Pretty much every organization I've ever worked with, and during lockdown, we counted up to over 200 that I've worked with. Pretty much every one of them, some bright spark comes up to me within a few days of us starting working with them and says to us, you know what's wrong with this place, don't you? And we're like, no, go on, surprise me. And they go, communication. And I'm like, well, there's a surprise, isn't it? Because even though communication is endemic to the human nature, we're not very good at it. We have misunderstandings all of the time. And so communication sits at the heart of most of the issues you find in organizations. And who better to help people communicate better than those of us who are trained to communicate on a broad scale. And so we've done media training with people, how they sit. I mean, presentation training is probably the bread and butter of our training. We also do behavioral training, but presentation's the one that they line up for, because it's a fundamental skill for anybody in business. But most people suffer from glossophobia, which is the fear of public speaking. And so showing them how to feel more confident in the zone, fake it till you make it, how to speak more clearly. I had a fabulous job a few years ago with a wonderful, wonderful man who was in quite a big business, was in line to become the next managing director. The challenge being that where he was from in the country had a very thick accent and they spoke very quickly. And this guy was going to be a visionary leader who was going to have to stand in front of his organization and be that I have a dream type visionary. Couldn't be understood by most of his audiences. So I had to go in there with him using some of my teaching background to help him with slowing down and how to speak a bit more clearly, working on his diction, and then working on how to portray that visionary leadership style. And he and I got on fabulously. He is now the managing director, a really successful business, and they love him there. But again, without my background, without that core skill of communication, wouldn't have been able to help him.
Yeah.
So there are so many areas that we can support people.
There is. You know, we are trained to read people, and that's where bad communication comes in, because people don't know how to read other people. You know, they look at everybody from their point of view. They don't actually put themselves in the other person's shoes, which as an actor you have to do. You know, you kind of have to understand why, you know, what's the motivation for, you know, what's going on, what's the intention behind what they're doing. So and NLP, which I know we both trained in, is that kind of, you know, other people's map of the world and really looking at that. But that again comes back to us sitting in that circle with the stunt trainees on a Wednesday morning, which is when you come in, and they introduce themselves to you. And invariably we get onto the fabulous word homophily, which I'd never heard before. Glossophobia is one that I use quite regularly when I'm working with people. But this sort of homophily, explain what homophily is, and then we'll describe explain how it helps in communication.
So in its simplistic formula or format, homophily is a chemical reaction that happens in our bodies when we meet somebody who looks a bit like us, sounds a bit like us, or sees the world through a similar lens to us. And so it's a known fact, for example, in interview training, and we do interview training with the world in two different ways. We train interviewers how to interview people using competency-based questions, open questions, probing questions, again, communication skill. But we train them to be careful of homophily, because if the person that I am interviewing is a bit like me, I may recruit them, not necessarily because they're the best person for the job, but because I like them. And this biological chemical reaction occurs that just makes me go, oh, I like this person. And so very often recruitment errors are caused because homophilies occurred within the interview room. So we train interviewers to avoid it.
Yeah.
Conversely, we've also trained people to be interviewed. And when we do that, we train people to go looking for it, find the point of homophily, because when it happens, it's a known fact that on a scale of 1 to 10, you'll get 2 extra points straight away. And homophily will happen all the time when you meet somebody and you just click with them because they share a common interest with you, or they're from the same part of the world as you are, or you know somebody, you've got somebody in common, and that's homophily. And we can't escape it. It happens all the time. But understanding it, really valuable depending which side you're sitting.
Which side, exactly. Because I was going to say that actually, that conversely, that it actually can be a bad thing in a situation, which is why, you know, so many boardrooms are full of white middle-aged men in suits, and there isn't the diversity because we will naturally
gravitate
gravitate to the people that look or speak like us or do the same thing as us. But in the interview situation, it is really, really helpful to find a point of connection. You know, and I quite often say to people, you know, maybe do your research, go and find out who's doing the interview, who you're speaking to, what the company does, and then find that connection, because that will always help.
The truth of our world today is it's a much more transparent world than it ever was before. We've all got some kind of online footprint, and either through doing my research online or talking to people. If you've, LinkedIn's a great example of 6 degrees of separation. I think we used to call it 6 steps to Kevin Bacon. But you can normally work your way back to somebody, and it's amazing how transparent the world is today. And so if I was to do my homework, I could probably find out a little bit about you. And if I can find out where the point of homophily is in an interview environment, I could bring that through and trigger that moment. It sounds horribly manipulative. And what's really interesting, and we run influencing courses, is the skills of influence and the skills of manipulation are actually identical skills. It's the intention that underpins it. That's different. And so could look at it as being manipulative. I like to look at it as being an influencing tool.
Yes, we did, you know, with the right, you know, intention behind it. I did bring this up at a training that I did with a quite a big brand, and had their marketing and sales teams in to do some training with them on presentation. And I mentioned homophily and sort of said similar things to them. And before I knew it, they were all on their phones in Facebook, and I found him. I found, you know, they were suddenly looking. It was like, oh my God, what have I done? What have I set up here? They were all sort of, you know, stalking starts, you know, there's a fine line between stalking and doing research.
There is. Yes, there is. However, you know.
I mean, when the boat goes faster as well is another one that comes up in that circle all the time. And it is so true. And I've even used that today with a client that I was working on today, you know, looking at visuals, and it's like, well, do you need that? Does it make the boat go faster? And I love that. I love that saying. Well, we have come to the end almost of about half an hour. I know. So I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody. And I would love to know, from all of the years of training that you've had training other people and listening to people speak, what makes a good speaker good and a bad speaker suck?
I think in a nutshell, preparation. Whether it's a legend, one of those apocryphal stories, I don't know, but I heard a statistic once that suggested your average speaker spends about 90% of their time working out what they're going to say, and if we're lucky, about 10% of the time working out how they're going to say it. The balance should be much more equitable. It should be more of a 50-50, because the day after you have any interaction with somebody, even you and I speaking to each other today, by tomorrow, you and I will have largely forgotten what each other said. What we will never forget is how we made each other feel in that moment. And I think the good presenters work out how do they want their audience to feel at the end of a presentation, and then they prepare a presentation so that the following day when somebody says, oh, you saw Adam yesterday, what was his presentation like? They go, oh, it's inspiring, or it was exciting, or influential, or a positive word. What you don't want them to say is it was boring. And I think what the poor speakers do is they probably spend too much time focusing on what they're going to say and never bring it to life for an audience, because it's that impact that makes the person the following day talk about how they felt afterwards.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Really look forward to working together on cohort 6.
Yeah, can't wait. Can't wait.
And yeah, fingers crossed. We play keepy uppy with them, and I won't explain that now.
No.
To explain keepy uppy, but yeah. Great times. Have a fabulous week, and I will be speaking to you very, very soon. If you would like to get in touch with Adam, if you'd like to find out what he does and what the company is, this is Herald, and that's where you will find out all of that. And I did actually look. I've got a picture. This is us here on our last cohort. So this was with the guys at Pinewood Studios in the ballroom. All men this time round. If there's anybody out there that fancies, any women out there that fancy training to be a stunt performer, go for it, because you'll get loads of work. Because there are no women. But yeah. And if you want to get in contact with me, then you can come to powertospeak.co.uk and you can find out what I do there. So once again, Adam, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.